Why does it feel like the Fever are running a full PR campaign for Stephanie White instead of promoting the actual players people pay to see? I'm sure she's a nice person, but she is not the franchise superstar, nor do fans pay to watch her. Fans are not stupid. Stop trying to force her on the fan base. We decide if she deserves support once we see the offense and how CC is being used. Not parked in a corner getting iced out again. Stop trying to manufacture approval through nonstop propaganda videos and put that energy into the...
Imagine inheriting the most valuable asset in the history of your sport. Imagine having a generational talent walk through your doors, a player who single-handedly transformed your league from an afterthought into a cultural phenomenon. Imagine ticket prices skyrocketing overnight, sellouts happening in seconds, and the entire sports world suddenly paying attention to something they had ignored for decades. Now, imagine squandering it. That is exactly what appears to be happening in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the fans are absolutely done playing nice about it. The Indiana Fever entered this season with the kind of opportunity that franchises dream about for generations. They had Caitlyn Clark, the most electric, most marketable, and most transformative player the WNBA has ever seen. They had a hungry fan base ready to spend serious money. They had momentum that no marketing budget could ever buy. And somehow, in what can only be described as one of the most stunning acts of organizational self-destruction in recent sports history, the Fever front office has managed to turn that golden opportunity into a pressure cooker, ready to explode. The axe finally dropped. The roster cuts came. The silence that followed was deafening. But this story goes far deeper than a few players being waived. This is a story about a franchise that seems completely out of touch with its own moment, a coaching situation that has fans furious, a PR strategy that has backfired spectacularly, and a league that many believe is failing its own biggest star. The tension in Indiana right now is unlike anything women's sports has ever witnessed, and it is only getting louder. Let us start with the players who just got waived, because the timing of these decisions tells you everything you need to know about the internal chaos currently rocking this organization. McConnell, gone. And honestly, that one stings a little because she looked like she could be a legitimate contributor. Jessica Timons, out. McConnell, shown the door. Kayana Taylor, dismissed. And then there is Celeste Taylor, a player that many observers genuinely believed had a real shot at making this roster in a meaningful way. She was sent packing in a move that felt less like a calculated strategic decision and more like a sacrificial offering thrown to an increasingly angry public. Here is the thing that people need to understand. These were not just names on a spreadsheet getting shuffled around by executives in suits. These were real players with real futures who got caught in the crossfire of a front office that refused to make timely decisions. The Fever waited until the absolute last possible moment to pull the trigger on these cuts, not because they were carefully evaluating talent, not because they were running sophisticated analytics to determine the optimal roster construction. They waited because they were hoping the storm would pass on its own. It did not pass. It got worse. By hovering on these decisions for as long as humanly possible, the front office revealed a level of indecision and organizational dysfunction that should genuinely worry every single fan who has invested their time, their money, and their emotional energy into this team. When you have a roster decision to make and you wait until the final hour because you are hoping public pressure will ease up, that is not strategic management. That is panic, plain and simple. And panic at the executive level of a sports franchise is always a precursor to disaster. The casualties of this delayed decision-making are real people who deserved better from an organization that should have had a clear vision long before crunch time arrived. The roster is thinner now, but the tension inside that building is thicker than ever. And no amount of late-stage roster trimming is going to fix what is fundamentally broken at the core of how this team is being run. Now, let us talk about the elephant in the room. The enormous, coaching whistle-wearing elephant that the Fever front office seems determined to dress up in marketing materials and shove down the fan base's throat whether they like it or not. The Indiana Fever's promotional machine has been running at full capacity lately, and here is the bizarre part. The subject of most of that promotional content is not Caitlyn Clark. It is not Sophie Cunningham. It is not any of the players that fans actually pay good money to watch. The primary subject of the Fever's most aggressive recent marketing push has been head coach Stephanie White. There are mic'd up segments. There are behind-the-scenes videos. There are carefully crafted clips designed to make Stephanie White look like the visionary architect of a championship-caliber program. And fans are not buying it. Not even a little bit. The response from the fan community has been nothing short of brutal. One of the most pointed comparisons making rounds right now is genuinely stinging in its accuracy. Promoting the Indiana Fever franchise through Stephanie White is being compared to promoting Bud Light through Dylan Mulvaney. And if you need a reminder of how that situation turned out for Anheuser-Busch, understand this clearly. Bud Light's market value and cultural standing have never recovered. Not remotely, not even close. They lost their position as the top-selling beer in America and have not come close to reclaiming it. That is the comparison fans are drawing to what the Fever front office is currently doing to its own brand. The mic'd-up videos being disseminated by the marketing team are actually making things worse rather than better. Fans are dissecting these clips frame by frame, and what they are finding is not inspiring. In one particularly criticized segment, there is messaging about players not trying to be athletic, but simply accepting being bullied. Think about that for a moment. You have one of the fastest, most creative, most athletically gifted rosters in the league, anchored by a player who can do things with a basketball that nobody in the history of women's basketball has ever done. And the messaging coming from the coaching staff is about not being athletic? That is not a coaching philosophy. That is a mismatch so severe it borders on organizational malpractice. Fans are smart, they always have been, and this new generation of WNBA fans is perhaps the most sophisticated sports audience any league has had to deal with in recent memory. They watch film, they analyze play diagrams, they understand spacing, ball movement, and offensive efficiency. And what they see when they watch the Fever run their offensive system is a head coach who has not figured out how to unlock the most dangerous weapon on her own team. You cannot manufacture fan approval through polished videos and choreographed sideline moments. You earn fan support by putting the ball in the right player's hands at the right time and letting the brilliance that everyone paid to see actually shine. The Fever marketing team seems to have gotten those two things completely backwards, and the fan base is reacting with the kind of cold fury that does not dissipate on its own. This is the part that makes the blood pressure of Fever fans rise to dangerous levels. And frankly, it should. We have watched, game after game, as Caitlyn Clark gets parked in the corner of the court like a piece of expensive furniture while the offense develops elsewhere. She is being used as a decoy, a very famous, very effective decoy that opens up the floor for other players. But here is the problem with that strategy when it is applied to someone of Clark's caliber. You are not just wasting a player, you are wasting a phenomenon. Nobody in the history of basketball, men's or women's, generates the kind of attention, the kind of defensive panic, the kind of pure electricity that Caitlyn Clark generates when she has the ball in her hands. Defenders collapse on her from 3 steps outside the three-point line. Opponents build their entire defensive game plans around disrupting her rhythm. She is, without any exaggeration, the most dangerous shooter the game has ever produced. And there are stretches of games where the coaching staff is content to let her stand in the corner and watch someone else miss a mid-range jumper. The conversation in fan communities has gotten sharp and pointed on this topic. People are asking a very simple question. Who in their right mind plays Caitlyn Clark as a forward? Who watches this player, someone built to run offense, to push the pace, to create off screens and out of pick and roll situations, and decides the best use of her gifts is to stick her on the perimeter away from the ball? This is not a complex basketball question. This is a fundamental understanding of personnel, and many fans believe the current coaching staff is failing that basic test. The emotional investment people have in watching Clark play freely and brilliantly is not a casual thing. These are fans who rearrange their schedules to be in seats, families who bought tickets months in advance, people who drove hours to Indiana because they wanted to watch greatness. When they show up and watch that greatness get minimized and constrained by a system that seems designed for a completely different player, the disappointment does not just linger, it festers. And festering disappointment eventually becomes something much louder and much more expensive for a franchise to deal with. Here is where the rubber meets the road in terms of real consequences. Here is where organizational dysfunction stops being a fan discussion and starts costing actual money. Last year, Fever tickets were disappearing in seconds. The resale market was absolutely wild, with fans paying premium prices just to be in the building when Caitlyn Clark took the court. The demand was historic. The energy was unprecedented. The Indiana Fever had managed to tap into something that the WNBA had been chasing for decades. A mainstream, passionate, economically powerful fan base that was showing up and spending. Now, just days before the season opener, there are nearly 1,700 tickets still sitting unsold on the primary market. Ticket prices have dropped, the urgency is gone. The frenzy that made last season feel like something truly special has been replaced by hesitation, by wait-and-see attitudes, by fans who are wondering whether the product they are being sold is actually worth their investment. Let that number sink in. 1,700 tickets for a game that should be an automatic sellout, for a team with arguably the most famous women's basketball player on the planet. 1,700 tickets available days before tip-off is not just a bad sign, it is a flashing warning signal that the fan base is actively reconsidering its relationship with this franchise. The ticket market is always the most honest metric in sports. You can produce all the hype videos you want, you can run marketing campaigns around the clock, you can flood social media with carefully curated content designed to manufacture excitement. But the secondary market never lies. When people stop paying up for tickets, when prices drop instead of rising, when seats sit empty in what should be a sold-out arena, that tells you everything you need to know about the current state of affairs between a franchise and the people who fund its existence. Perhaps the most painful part of this entire conversation for Indiana Fever fans is the road not taken, the decision that was not made. The coach who was available and was not hired. Sandy Brondello was on the market. She has a championship pedigree. She has extensive experience managing rosters filled with high-profile superstars, including Sabrina Ionescu and Breanna Stewart in New York. She has been openly vocal about her appreciation for Caitlyn Clark's game, about her ability to read what makes a player like Clark so devastating, and build an offense that amplifies those gifts, rather than suppressing them. She was, by almost every available measure, the ideal candidate to take over a team with this kind of talent and this kind of pressure. The Fever went a different direction. And now, every time the offense stalls, every time Clark is left standing in the corner, every time a play breaks down because the system seems fundamentally misaligned with the talent it is supposed to serve, the question comes back. What if? What if they had brought in someone who had done this before at the highest level? What if they had hired a coach who had proven she could build championship caliber offenses around transcendent talents? What if the front office had matched the ambition of its fan base instead of settling for a safe, familiar choice? The what if question is the most toxic thing that can exist in a sports organization because it never goes away. Every loss will carry it. Every wasted possession will echo it. Every corner-parked Clark possession will make fans think about the coach who was right there, available, willing, and experienced enough to make this work. If the front office dysfunction and coaching concerns are the fire, then the WNBA's broader institutional behavior is the gasoline being poured on top. Many fans feel strongly that the league itself is complicit in the way its biggest star is being handled. The pattern of allowing physical play and what many consider cheap shots against Clark without adequate officiating responses has created a narrative of institutional indifference toward the league's most valuable asset. When the player who is single-handedly responsible for a historic surge in viewership, attendance, and cultural relevance is getting knocked around without meaningful protection from officials, something is fundamentally wrong with the priorities at the league level. Then there is the promotional question. Caitlyn Clark is, by any objective measure, the most famous player in the WNBA right now. She is likely the most famous female basketball player in the world. She has driven more new fan acquisition for this league than any marketing campaign in WNBA history. And yet there is a persistent sense among the fan community that the league's promotional machinery continues to center other players, while Clark is expected to generate her own cultural gravitational pull without equivalent institutional support. This perceived double standard, rooted in what many fans view as a broader discomfort within certain institutional corners of the sport about the specific nature of Clark's appeal, is creating a toxic undercurrent that makes every controversy feel bigger and every slight feel more deliberate. Whether that perception is entirely fair or not, it is real, it is widespread, and it is coloring the way fans interpret every decision being made around their favorite player. Let us be direct about what the coming weeks mean for this franchise. If the Indiana Fever start this season with a mediocre record, something in the range of 7-8 through the first 15 games, the pressure that currently exists will multiply into something this organization has never experienced. The fan base is already on a hair trigger. A slow start will not be met with patience and understanding. It will be met with calls for immediate and sweeping changes that go far beyond a few roster adjustments. There is no honeymoon period available for this team. There is no grace for a rebuilding year. There is no cushion of goodwill left to absorb a slow start. You do not get to take your time figuring things out when you have the most scrutinized player in the history of your sport on your roster. Every game is a referendum. Every possession matters. Every decision made by the coaching staff is being evaluated in real time by millions of people who know exactly what they are watching and are not afraid to say so at the top of their lungs. The opening night atmosphere will be a defining moment. The fans showing up will carry one of two emotional energies. They will either be there to celebrate the beginning of something great, willing to give this coaching staff one more chance to prove the doubters wrong, or they will be there already, sitting in judgment, waiting for confirmation that the revolution they have been calling for is necessary and overdue. Here is the truth that every decision maker inside the Indiana Fever organization needs to sit with before the first ball is tipped this season. Caitlyn Clark is a once-in-a-generation gift. Not once in a decade, not once in the history of the WNBA, once in a generation of sport itself. She is the kind of player who builds industries, who creates fans from nothing, who makes people who have never cared about basketball fall completely in love with the game. She is doing for the WNBA what players like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird did for the NBA in the 1980s, what LeBron James did for global basketball. She is that rare, that consequential, and that irreplaceable. And the window to build something legendary around her is not infinite. Fans are already cooling. Ticket prices are already falling. The momentum that felt unstoppable 12 months ago is showing its first real signs of vulnerability. Every week that passes without a clear, compelling vision from the front office is another week of erosion on what should be the most bulletproof brand in women's sports. The cuts have been made. The PR campaign is in full swing. The season opener is days away. But none of that matters if the real questions remain unanswered when the game begins. Is the offense going to be built around Caitlyn Clark's extraordinary gifts? Is she going to run free instead of standing in corners? Is the coaching staff going to prove that they belong in the same building as this level of talent? Is the front office going to demonstrate that they understand the magnitude of the moment they have been handed? The fans have made their demands crystal clear. They are not asking for perfection, they are asking for intelligence. They are asking for a team that plays with the brilliance and the fire that their superstar is known for. They are asking for an organization that treats this moment with the reverence and the urgency it deserves. The roar of the crowd is coming. The question is whether it will be a roar of exhilaration or a roar of outrage. The Indiana Fever has a few precious days left to make sure they are building toward the former rather than accelerating toward the latter. The clock is not just ticking, it is counting down. And in Indiana, everybody knows it.